Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports. He's covered the NBA for a long time. Joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. He usually joins us on Wednesdays. We bumped him back to Tuesday because, one, well, the news of Kobe Bryant passing away on Sunday, but two, also because with the guys down Super Bowl Radio Row, I couldn't guarantee Keith would be on tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, Keith, appreciate you jumping on a day early.
Hey, not a problem. I'm happy to come on whenever you'll have me.
Well, we always appreciate you making the time for us. Also, before we get into everything else, I didn't prep Keith about this, but this is an ongoing off-the-air conversation. So, for those who don't know, Keith Smith and I are in the same fantasy basketball league.
Oh, boy.
And I am very proud to say that I am keeping up with, in this case, the Smiths and the other guys who cover the NBA. I am holding my own this year in the fantasy basketball league. So if I can I'm not saying I'm going to win the league, Keith. I'm just saying I am not doing bad. I'm proud of myself for that.
Hey, man, you should be. You know, it's this year especially, I don't know that anybody's been able to put a whole roster out there for an entire week. So congrats to you on that one.
Yeah, the other funny thing is we only have one injured reserve, and I think everybody in our league has had at least two guys injured at a time the entire season.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's enough of our fantasy teams. Let's get it back to the NBA. So, obviously, the sad news came down Sunday, Keith. We've been kind of the last 2 days getting everybody's perspective on Kobe, whether it's a personal story, whether it's an observation of him. I just want to kind of open the floor to you to kind of give your thoughts and perspective on Kobe Bryant, the basketball player and the man.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it is, as everyone, just completely shocking. I was kind of doing my Sunday routine, setting up my week and getting ready to start writing, and then the news broke, and there was so much, happening all at once, and, all these different reports and everything. It was just very, very hard to, kind of put it together and fathom what was going on. And as the day went along and then we found out more and more, it was one of those things where it only got worse. I think as the day went, you were in a position early on where it was, all right, well, it's sad, but then when you hear about his daughter and then the other loss of young life, those are the things that really hit me. As far as Kobe goes, complicated guy, complicated legacy, but I think he had done a lot in the latter years of his career and then since retiring to really kind of turn things around, change the perspective of him for a lot of people. And it's one of those things where I started to find him to become very relatable. I have a daughter who's, a little younger than his daughter who passed, and she plays sports. So I found it very relatable that he was a sports dad, hiking her around to a game practice and those kind of things. And that's just that really hit home for me. And that has made this, really tough.
When you think about Kobe Bryant, the player, one thing that stands out to me from everybody's stories, whether it's the players, whether it's people who covered him, we had, for example, Bobby Marks on yesterday. He said his first scouting assignment was to go see a high school guard named Kobe Bryant, or whoever's story it may be. The one thing that stands out to me most, Keith, is that I don't think it could be stated enough that Kobe Bryant, for as great as he was also one of the most unique athletes we've ever seen play in the NBA, and the fact that his mentality, his work ethic, his style, his everything that made him was so unique from everyone else that we may never see a player like Kobe Bryant ever play in the league ever again.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. The guys don't come in now with that, there's the famous story when they beat the 76ers in the finals. He talked about ripping their heart out. And that was Kobe. He was going to go out there and try and destroy you whenever it was. And beyond that, too, I think kind of what you were getting to as well is he's extremely self-made as a player as well. Not that he didn't have physical gifts and physical talents, but his work ethic and drive to be, the best player that he could be and ultimately one of the best players of all time, that a lot of that came from within. So it's one of those things where, once you put that drive with the talent, with that desire to just destroy you, that's just something that's a rare combination that you don't see all that often in the league.
where does Kobe, in your estimation, and I know this is the conversation that maybe it's too early to have it, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't care at this point. I mean, I feel like we've all been saturated by Kobe conversation for the last couple of days, but here's a question that I don't think has been asked enough. Where do you put Kobe in your all-time list? Because, Magic says he's the greatest Laker of all time. Some people think that Kobe's better than LeBron. Some people think LeBron's better than Kobe. Where does Kobe stand in the pantheon of all time for you, Keith Smith?
Yeah, off the top of my head, and I wrote about this for Real GM a few years back, but I have him right around at that top 10 mark. There's a handful of guys who are ahead of him, and with all due respect to Magic Johnson, I think he would still be ahead of him on the all-time list. But what is interesting with that is I think Magic is right in that Kobe is the greatest Laker of all time. He was a Laker for his entirety of his career. And that really does mean something. That's something that's very, very important. And I think, at this point for, as we look at overall legacy, that is definitely a true statement. And then his place in the league, it's right around that top 10. I'd have to really dive into it and think about it because it's been a few years since I've done that exercise. But I think that's, where he lands. And when you think about how many great players there have been in the NBA, that's a pretty significant accomplishment.
Let's transition over to the league right now. We know the Lakers and Clippers, they have postponed their game tonight. We know a lot of guys around the league, they're changing their numbers. They're doing homages to Kobe. What do you think the league as a whole is going to do to honor Kobe? Because we know the players and coaches have done stuff, but what do you think the league as a whole? Because, for example, Mike Gill, who hosts the Sports Bash, he mentioned, maybe the league should rename the All-Star Game MVP trophy or All-Star Weekend, the Kobe Bryant All-Star Weekend. Are we expecting that kind of level of homage to Kobe from the league or something else?
Yeah, I think we're going to see something. I think because of the fact that he meant so much to the league as a whole and to a lot of the players in the league, I think that the league will do something. It's the perfect weekend coming up here in a couple weeks with the All-Star game coming. I think, we might see, some have suggested maybe one team wears all number 8 jerseys and one team wears all number 24 jerseys. And I think that would be a pretty cool thing that they could do. And then as long term, I love the idea of renaming the All-Star game MVP trophy the Kobe Bryant trophy, because that was something that he won. I want to say it was 4 times, which is as much as Bob Pettit and him, I believe, are the two who won that award the most. And that I think is a really, great idea to, honor him on a stage where, that should be the best player of that point in the season. They're all going after that. And the guy who plays the best on that big stage, why not honor him with the Kobe Bryant trophy?
Let's get to also what's going on with the current teams, which is what's been overshadowed by all this conversation with Kobe passing is that, Keith, the NBA trade deadline is right around the corner. And because of all the mourning and everything everyone's doing, this time of year, we typically would have a lot of rumors going on. But instead, we're dealing with the passing of one of the greatest of all time at too young of an age. So, Keith, what is going on with the trade deadline? Because, the Sixers play tonight. Everyone's got 20 different reasons why they should trade 5 different players on the roster. There's all kinds of conversation. Will the Celtics actually do something at the trade deadline this year? What are the Lakers going to do? Andre Iguodala's name has been rumored for months. There's so many things ahead of the trade deadline that usually this time of year we're swamped in those rumors.
Yeah, well, what happened was things were just kind of starting to get kicked off. We saw the Jordan Clarkson trade a few weeks ago, and then we saw Dallas make a couple moves as they were looking to shore up their center position with Dwight Powell out for the season. They picked up Willie Cauley-Stein, and things were starting to move. It's usually smaller deals get things moving, and then things amp up over here in this week. So, but what happened was things kind of ground to a halt over the last couple of days, as everybody was, really kind of taking a step back and taking their time to pay proper respect. But I think you'll see that start to pick up here in the next couple of days, and then we'll be a week out from the trade deadline. And I think we might have some movement now. What you're starting to see is some of these teams are saying, you know what, we're not going to have cap space next year anyway, so let's go get this done. Let's go make these moves. What has happened over really the last 2 weeks is we've seen in both conferences several teams really fall fall kind of out of the playoff picture. I think when we talked a couple weeks back, every team in the West, minus the worst team in the Western Conference, the Warriors, was within 2 games of the playoffs. And now you're starting to see a few teams have dropped, 4.5, 5 games out. And that's when those teams start to say, all right, it's not only making up 4.5 to 5 games, that's maybe doable, but we've also got to climb 6 other teams to get into the playoffs. That part is where it gets to be where it's not going to happen. We can't pull that part of it off too. So that's where I think you're going to start to see these teams, position themselves. Keep an eye on guys who have, kind of those big expiring contracts too, because that's going to be important to those handful of teams that do have cap space that are going to move. I know the New York Knicks are motivated to move several of their guys. That's kind of the contracts they signed them to in the offseason were set up specifically to be moved by the deadline, so that's going to be important. So I think it's going to get really interesting here in the next couple of days, and then we'll have a lot of rumors leading up till next Thursday.
The 76ers, again, they play the Warriors tonight. You'll hear the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. What are your expectations for what the Sixers can and can't do? I know there's a lot of chatter in our area about various players. You get the overreactionary fans who say, trade Al Horford. Then you get the other people who say, just...
I didn't say that. I just want to point that out. Okay. I'm having a nice time listening here, but I didn't say that.
There's a lot of people, though, who bring up, whether it's Mike Scott, he's having a rough year, or James Ennis. I know his contract is a unique situation. So, what can the Sixers actually do ahead of the trade deadline, Keith?
Yeah, you're not going to see big moves because they're not going to trade any of their kind of 5 big contracts. None of those 5 guys are going anywhere. They know that in order for them to go where they need to go, they need all 5 of those guys to be their best version of themselves. And that's if you're going to do something that big, that's going to happen over the summer. And that maybe they don't go as far as they want to go in the playoffs, and that's where it lands out. But you're not going to see anything massive like that leading up to the deadline. But I do think they're going to be in the market for some smaller moves as they try to shore up that bench. I think they're in a position now where they might want to get another big in there because Embiid has been hurt. I know he's due back fairly soon here, but then there's still a lot on him and Horford both, and that's tough because sure, Mike Scott is good in there and they form a fairly good 3-man big rotation, but you'd like to have one more guy. So on those nights when Embiid or Horford needs to sit out, you've got that other true big that you can plug in there because Norvell Pell is basically, if not basically, he is out of 2 days. Jonah Bolden hasn't really stepped up. Kyle Quinn hasn't worked out the way they'd hoped for. So I think you'll see them make a move for a big, and then that kind of never-ending quest to find bench shooting scoring, that'll continue as well. So I think you'll see a couple smaller moves around the edges, add a couple rotation players, 9th, 10th man types, but I don't think you're going to get any blockbusters.
Follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA as he joined us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Keith, appreciate your flexibility today and this week. Always appreciate the insights, and we'll catch you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff out of you, Keith. I'm a fan, even though I didn't say much.
I appreciate it.
Keith Smith, as all guests, joined us on the Boardwalk on the Hotline.